What happens after death? Where science and religion agree. Full narration script. What happens after death? It's the one question every human being asks. And the one question no one has ever definitively answered. Some say, nothing. Just darkness. Silence. The end. Others say, everything begins. A new world. A judgment. A continuation. But here's the strange part. When you look closely, science and religion aren't always as far apart as we think. In fact, in some of the most unexpected ways, they overlap. So today we're going deep into biology, consciousness, near-death experiences, and ancient belief systems. To answer one question, what actually happens after we die? Let's begin with what we know. From a scientific standpoint, death is not a single moment. It's a process. It begins when the heart stops beating. Blood flow ceases. Oxygen no longer reaches the brain. Within seconds, consciousness begins to fade. Within minutes, brain activity drops dramatically. But here's something most people don't realize. The brain doesn't shut off instantly. There is evidence suggesting a brief surge of activity, a final cascade of electrical signals, almost like the brain is firing everything it has left. Some researchers have compared it to a last flash. Others describe it as a kind of internal storm. And during this window, something very strange can happen across cultures, across decades, across completely different belief systems. People who have come close to death report remarkably similar experiences. They describe a tunnel, a bright light, a feeling of peace, a sense of leaving their body. Some say they watched doctors trying to revive them. Others describe reliving moments from their life, not just seeing them, but feeling them again. Even more intriguing, many people report encountering something, a presence, a being, or simply a sense of overwhelming awareness. Now, science attempts to explain this. Possible causes include oxygen deprivation, chemical releases in the brain, the breakdown of normal sensory processing, even theories about naturally occurring psychedelic compounds. But here's the issue. These explanations describe mechanisms, not meaning. They explain how something might happen, but not why the experience feels so structured, so real, so consistent. And that's where things begin to blur, long before neuroscience, long before modern medicine. Human civilizations were already trying to understand death. And despite being separated by geography and time, many religions arrived at similar conclusions. That death is not the end. In Christianity and Islam, the soul leaves the body and enters a phase of judgment. In Hinduism and Buddhism, the soul or consciousness continues through cycles of rebirth, different frameworks. But the same core idea, something continues. But it doesn't stop there. Many traditions also describe a transition phase, a review of one's life, a movement toward light or another realm. Sound familiar? Because it mirrors, almost perfectly, what modern near-death survivors report. Now this is where things get really interesting. Science and religion fundamentally disagree on one major point, whether consciousness depends entirely on the brain. But despite that disagreement, they converge in unexpected ways. 1. Death is not instant. Science says the body shuts down gradually. Religion says the soul transitions. Both reject the idea of death as a simple switch. 2. The life review. Science reported in near-death experiences. Religion described as judgment or karmic reflection. Different interpretations, but an almost identical structure. 3. Loss of self. Neuroscience suggests that as the brain shuts down, our sense of identity dissolves. Mystical traditions have said for thousands of years that the ego must dissolve before entering a higher state. 4. A boundary we cannot cross. Science reaches a limit we cannot measure beyond brain death. Religion begins exactly there. One says, we don't know. The other says, you must believe. But both agree on something critical. There is a boundary, and we are still standing on one side of it. So now we arrive at the central question. Does consciousness survive death? Science currently says there is no evidence that it does. All known data suggests that consciousness is produced by the brain. And when the brain stops, so does experience. But here's the complication. We still don't fully understand consciousness itself. We don't know why subjective experience exists, how awareness emerges from matter, why the brain produces a self. And all this is known as the hard problem of consciousness. And until that problem is solved, any claim about what happens after death remains incomplete. There is a possibility, a very real one, that death is simply the end. No awareness, no memory, no continuation, not darkness. Because darkness requires perception. Just nothing. But here's something important. You wouldn't experience that nothing, because experience itself would no longer exist. But there is also another possibility, that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but filtered by it. That the brain is less like a generator and more like a receiver. And when it shuts down, what we call self is released into something we don't yet understand. This idea is not proven, but it hasn't been ruled out either. So what happens after death? The honest answer is, we don't know. Science can describe the process of dying with incredible precision. Religion can give meaning and narrative to what might come next. But neither can fully cross that boundary. And maybe that's the point. Because the question of death is really a question about life. How we live. What we value. What we believe. Because whether there is something after, or nothing at all, one thing is certain, this moment, right now, is real. And it matters. End screen CTA. If this made you think differently about life and death, subscribe for more deep explorations into history, science, and the unknown. And tell us in the comments, what do you